Welcome back to Fun Facts Online. Today, we are opening the books on one of the most powerful, dangerous, and misunderstood forces in the world: sovereign debt. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet or bankers in high-rise offices. This is the fuel that powers infrastructure, funds wars, and cushions societies against pandemics. But it is also the tether that can strangle growth, topple governments, and plunge millions into poverty. As we navigate the mid-20s, we are living through what experts call a polycrisis, a tangled web of post-pandemic recovery, geopolitical fragmentation, returning inflation, and climate change. And sitting right in the center of this storm is the global ledger of sovereign debt. So, for the next 20 minutes, we are going to dissect the anatomy of national solvency, explore the legal battlefields of New York, and look at the financial alchemy that might just save us. Let's dive in. To understand the crisis, we first have to understand the machinery. Sovereign debt operates under a unique set of physical and political laws that are very different from a household budget. The most critical distinction we need to make is between solvency and liquidity. These two terms get thrown around a lot, so let's clarify them. Solvency is a long-term question. It asks, does a country have the economic capacity to pay back what it owes over time? It's a math equation involving the present value of future revenues versus current debt. Liquidity, on the other hand, is about right now. A state faces a liquidity crisis when it is actually solvent in the long run, meaning it has the wealth, but it lacks the immediate cash to meet a payment today. This usually happens due to a sudden stop in capital markets, where investors panic and refuse to roll over bonds. The danger is that a liquidity crisis, if mismanaged, can mutate into a solvency crisis. If panic forces a country to borrow at 15% interest instead of 5%, the debt burden snowballs, rendering a healthy nation bankrupt. This matters to you and me because of the sovereign risk channel. This is the contagion effect. When a government's balance sheet looks shaky, it infects the whole economy. The scariest version of this is called the doom loop. Here is how it works. Domestic banks are often the largest holders of their own government's debt. They buy government bonds because they are supposed to be safe assets. But if investors fear a default, the price of those bonds crashes. Suddenly, the bank's assets are worth much less. The banks look insolvent, so they stop lending to businesses and regular people. The economy slows down, tax revenue falls, and the government's position gets even worse. To save the economy, the government might have to bail out the banks, which increases the debt even further, restarting the cycle. This loop was the heart of the Eurozone crisis a decade ago, and it remains a massive risk today. Now, you might look at a country like Japan and ask, how do they survive? Japan has a debt-to-GDP ratio exceeding 250%. By orthodox standards, they should be collapsed. But yields on Japanese government bonds remain rock bottom. This highlights a crucial divide in economic theory between orthodoxy and modern monetary theory, or MMT. The orthodox view, held by institutions like the IMF, focuses on fiscal space and keeping debt below certain thresholds. MMT, however, argues that a country with monetary sovereignty, one that prints its own currency like Japan or the US, cannot be forced into default by markets because it can always print money to pay creditors. The constraint isn't solvency, it's inflation. Japan sustains high debt because over 90% of it is held domestically by its own citizens and central bank. There is no risk of capital flight. This teaches us that debt structure matters just as much as debt volume. However, the picture is starkly different in the emerging markets and developing economies. The 2020s have brought about a silent debt crisis. During the low-interest era up to 2021, many developing nations borrowed heavily in foreign currencies like dollars and euros. When global central banks hiked interest rates to fight inflation in 2022 and 2023, the debt service costs for these nations skyrocketed. We are now seeing a situation of net negative transfers. For the first time in decades, many developing nations are paying more to external creditors than they are receiving in new loans or aid. They are forced into fiscal repression, cutting spending on schools, hospitals, and infrastructure just to service debt. It is a vicious cycle of austerity and stagnation. Let's look at some real-world cases to see how this plays out. Zambia serves as patient zero for the modern sovereign debt era. In late 2020, it became the first African nation to default during the pandemic. Its debt stack was a complex lasagna of Chinese infrastructure loans, Eurobonds held by Western asset managers, and multilateral debt. The restructuring took nearly 4 years. Why? Because the creditors couldn't agree. Western bondholders demanded transparency on Chinese loans, while Chinese state lenders were reluctant to take losses alongside private hedge funds. The G20 tried to fix this with the Common Framework, but in Zambia's case, it proved bureaucratic and slow, leaving the country in economic limbo for years. It showed us that the international architecture for debt resolution is broken for a multipolar world. Then there is Sri Lanka, a cautionary tale of what happens when liquidity meets politics. Years of borrowing for white elephant projects, combined with bad tax cuts and the loss of tourism due to COVID, drained their foreign reserves. Lacking dollars to import fuel, medicine, and food, the economy ground to a halt, and inflation hit 70%. This triggered a political revolution, forcing the president to flee. It was a visceral demonstration that debt sustainability is a matter of food security and political survival. But it's not all bad news. Look at Jamaica. In 2012, it was written off as a basket case with debt at 144% of GDP. By 2023, that figure fell to 72%. The IMF called it miraculous. How did they do it? They built a massive domestic consensus. They created an oversight committee with civil society and unions to monitor fiscal targets. This depoliticized debt reduction. The country ran huge budget surpluses for years. It required immense public sacrifice, but because the citizens owned the reform, they stuck with it. It proves that domestic political ownership is more powerful than any external bailout. Now, what happens when a country simply cannot pay? We enter the legal battlefield. There is no bankruptcy court for nations. It's a negotiation governed by contract law, mostly in New York or London. The specter haunting this process is the ghost of Argentina and the vulture funds. After Argentina defaulted in 2001, most creditors accepted a reduction in what they were owed. But a group of hedge funds bought the distressed debt for pennies and sued for full payment. A New York judge ruled that Argentina couldn't pay its good creditors unless it paid the vulture funds in full. This froze Argentina out of markets for years. To prevent this from happening again, the world introduced enhanced collective action clauses. These are paragraphs in bond contracts that allow a supermajority of creditors, usually 75%, to agree to a restructuring that legally binds the dissenting minority. It prevents a single hedge fund from holding an entire country hostage. We also have to talk about the changing face of creditors. Historically, the Paris Club, a group of mainly Western nations, coordinated debt relief. But today, China is the world's largest bilateral creditor, and it is not in the Paris Club. This has created a coordination nightmare. Western lenders fear that if they grant debt relief, the money will just go to pay off Chinese loans, and vice versa. Plus, many loans have non-disclosure clauses, making it impossible to know exactly how much a country owes. This opacity paralyzes the sustainability analysis. So is there a way forward? Yes, and it involves some incredible innovation. One of the most exciting developments is debt for nature swaps. Let's look at the Belize model. In 2021, Belize was drowning in debt, and its barrier reef was suffering. They pulled off a brilliant financial maneuver. First, Belize bought back its expensive commercial bonds, which were trading at a discount. To fund this buyback, they issued new blue bonds. But here is the trick. These new bonds were backed by political risk insurance from the US government. Because of that insurance, the new bonds had a great credit rating and a low interest rate. The savings generated from the lower interest payments were then legally ring-fenced and funneled into marine conservation. They reduced their debt by 12% of GDP and secured millions for ocean protection. Ecuador recently did an even bigger version of this for the Galapagos. It is green alchemy, solving a solvency crisis and a climate crisis at the same time. Another tool isn't financial but technological. Digital public infrastructure. Look at India. By creating a biometric digital ID and a unified payment interface, the government plugged leaks in its subsidy system. They can transfer money directly to citizens without middlemen skimming off the top. This broadens the tax base and makes public spending hyper-efficient. For a finance minister, this digital stack is a tool to increase the budget surplus without raising tax rates. It turns technology into fiscal space. As we wrap up, we need to realize that high debt is a drag on the soul of an economy. It crowds out private investment and limits our ability to respond to shocks. To restore stability, we need a multi-pronged approach. Debtors need to mobilize domestic resources through better tax capacity. The international community needs to reform the common framework to include statutory timelines and automatic standstills on payments during negotiations. And we need to integrate climate resilience into debt contracts. Countries like Barbados are pioneering clauses that automatically pause debt payments if a hurricane hits. This prevents a natural disaster from becoming a financial disaster. The global ledger must balance. But right now, it is unbalanced by opacity, geopolitical rivalry, and outdated legal frameworks. We have the tools, from collective action clauses to blue bonds and digital infrastructure. What is required now is the political will to use them. Because in an era of polycrisis, sovereign debt sustainability isn't just about paying back bankers. It's about ensuring that nations have the resources to survive the changing climate and provide for their people. That is the true bottom line. Thanks for listening to Fun Facts Online.